And picking ultimately the right vehicle for you is going to do one thing: take time and take a lot of consideration. So, hey guys, Robert here with Wonder Offroad. I'm here with Eric from Mission Offroad. And guys, we're going to have a good topic today. We're going to talk to you guys about what's the perfect off-road vehicle. Well, actually, no, sorry, I take that back. How to pick the perfect off-road vehicle, because there is no perfect vehicle.
Right.
So, Eric, what do you think would be, the importance of this whole situation of picking the right vehicle, man?
Um, it's really a tough subject now because people get so excited about acquiring their first 4x4 or SUV and they get excited about exploring the outdoors. They might jump at a chance to buy whatever they see and hear about. And then what the true answer is they need to gain the experience and customize the vehicle that will become their perfect off-road vehicle.
Hey, you're right, too, because there's so many different things you have to consider, when you're picking your vehicle. Because for me, it's not just about four-wheel drive. It's about the
Right.
capabilities, right?
Right.
What can this vehicle do? Is this vehicle cheap to fix?
Right.
Is this vehicle reasonable to upgrade? Because that's the big question you got to ask yourself.
Right.
Can you even afford the upgrades? If you were to
Mhm.
break a major part, could you even afford the repairs?
Right.
So, like the way I'm gonna start this is like, what are you going to use this vehicle for, right? What would you like? I know me and you are both Toyota guys. We have our Land Cruisers, and but like, what would define your use? As a weekend vehicle or as a daily driver? How do you pick yours, Eric?
Well, to based on my own experience, when I again got really excited about off-roading, I got the 2007 FJ Cruiser back in 2007. So again, without any experience, I started modifying it, but it was also a daily driver. And what not a lot of people know that the more mods you do, the less efficient a car becomes.
Oh yeah,
So you need to really keep that in mind. All of a sudden, you have larger tires, heavier tires, more armor on your vehicle, and then all of a sudden, the MPG starts going down, and like what the hell happened? But it's because you did all these modifications. So a lot of people don't know that once you modify your daily driver, you're going to make some sacrifices. And if you want to do it, that's fine. That's your prerogative. And but there are some people like you and I. We both have
hmm
multiple vehicles, so we have the pleasure of modifying something that won't necessarily be our daily driver.
yeah. Like for me, for example, my 80 is my dedicated off-road vehicle. I still can drive it
Mm,
daily, not that I want
right,
to,
right,
but gas is at that point, like I think the current MPG on my 80 with 35s, not re-geared, we're looking at 9 miles to the gallon, maybe 11 on the
yeah,
highway.
right, yeah, yeah,
And yeah, that adds up really fast when you guys doing the math right here. The stock tank on the 80 series Land Cruiser is 24 gallons. Now for me, I modified mine, so I have an extended range 37 gallon main tank. So at least
nice,
it increases my range, but again, what's your dedicated purpose? Mine is
right,
adventure vehicle. Now, my wife's
mm-hmm.
vehicle that I've been modifying for the last 2 years now is still a daily driver, so I have to keep the modifications within reason.
Right, right,
So, and that's what our type of off-roading, you're going to do with it. That's a
right.
big,
But
big thing that's going to dictate also how you're going to modify your vehicle,
and
right?
the purpose for it is it's there's so many segments to off-roading. There's rock crawling,
Oh yeah,
mudding, overlanding, or just glamping. Even glamping involves some off-roading.
oh
It really
yeah,
people eventually learn what category they fall into, and it takes time to figure that out.
exactly. And the one way I found work out, is like just go out, you know,
Yes,
explore.
yeah, just
If you
start.
have if you have a vehicle that's at least has good ground clearance and you can get out and do a lot of decent trails. You're not
Yes,
gonna you're not gonna of course do some, like John Bull or any of the crazy ones, but you're gonna get out there and learn. So you got to
right,
consider too also as you're learning, how many people are you carrying? Are you carrying the family? You carrying yourself? You carrying you yourself and the dog, right, Eric?
Right. It's amazing how I have a friend that has a GX 460, family of
Mm-hmm.
four, and pets, and they all fit in their GX 460 with camping gear. So I do not know how they pull that off.
I
But
wanted to learn how this one too.
yeah, yeah. But I'm very amazed. And through the years I've also seen people sell their FJ Cruiser saying, "Oh, I'm starting a family and the FJ Cruiser is so small." And I don't always agree with that because I my family of three, we were fine. You know, my son's had the FJ Cruiser since he was a baby,
Mm-hmm.
and we still have it to this day. And I don't know. I don't always agree that that's an excuse to sell the FJ Cruiser just because he
No.
thinks it's too small. But you just have to figure it out sometimes.
Yeah, it's always to consider your mission needs. People forget
Right.
that. Like they get all excited, they want to buy like they buy their first 4-wheel drive vehicle, but they all forget they got a family of four to try to stuff in
Right.
themselves, their gear, their food, and whatever else they want to bring on these trips.
Right.
Like for me, for example, I like that the Cruiser is a good switch hitter for this reason, is that I can make it for the family. But
Mm-hmm.
when I know I'm not having them on the trip, I can unbolt the back seats, take them out, and now I got more cargo room to take
Right.
essentially everything in the kitchen sink, or even in some cases, not that I do this, I've only done this once, is sleep in the back of the vehicle. Now I can take less
Mm-hmm.
gear, but I can do a little bit more, pack up and go. So,
Right.
it just depends on your situation of what's happening around that time.
Right. And speaking
So,
of third row, it's funny how people buy these third row SUVs only to find themselves removing it permanently because they want to build out their off road shelving system.
no, you're totally right. Like some of the fifth gen Forerunners come with a third row,
Mm,
but I've even seen, even in the 80 series too, they're only really meant for small children. There's like no one's
right.
going to sit back there comfortably.
Right.
Now, granted, now if you have a suburban, that can seat 8 people
Yes.
comfortably and the
Mm,
kitchen sink, yes.
right.
But then there
Yeah.
comes another topic of, capabilities. Not all of them. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I think some Suburbans do have a low gear, but others don't. Just depending on the model
Mm,
year you get. Like Toyota, you have a high range and a low range. All
yeah.
right, for 2 high, and you have a 4 high and a 4 low. But I've seen some because I worked in the rental car industry for years, and
Mm,
when I saw the 4-wheel drives come in, not all of them had the low range gear,
no.
which
Yeah.
is a
You're right.
big, big, big. So you got to consider capability of the vehicle. So that's going to bring our biggest topic. Okay, what is the right vehicle for you? Is it going to be an SUV, a truck, or a crossover? So I like to start with the crossovers because this is a really interesting topic right now. So the
Yeah.
crossovers, I don't know if you saw, Eric, but the National Park Service put out
Mm-hmm.
not long ago. If you are not not full time, sorry, if you're not a dedicated vehicle that has 4-wheel drive,
Right.
not all wheel drive, there's a difference,
Correct.
guys.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They will ticket you on the trail and make you get off the
Right.
trail.
Right.
And it's for safety reasons, of course, as you know, that there's been a lot of vehicles and people that unfortunately were stranded because the vehicle broke down because it wasn't capable.
Right.
And like in Death Valley, for example, people have died. So in terms of this, just consider that when you're purchasing, if you're going to purchase a crossover. Now the SUVs, Eric, what is your take on that? Since you have quite a few different off-roading SUVs.
Yeah. That's a tough one. First of all, I've never owned a unibody all wheel drive vehicle. All my vehicles are body on frame truck based SUVs.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that what you mentioned about all wheel drive vehicles being ticketed on at some public lands is it's a tough one because I know I follow a lot of people on Instagram that own like Honda Pilots and Subarus, and they're very it depending on the driver is very capable of using their vehicle because they've learned. But yeah, I understand that there's a risk involved, and it costs. I can't guarantee this, but it probably costs taxpayers thousands of dollars to recover a person that's in need in the wrong vehicle out there. But again, we all know that even people with capable four-wheel drive vehicles get hurt, die, get stuck, etc. in those areas.
And,
But and mhm,
mm-hmm. He's right. It's a life and death situation when you pick your vehicle. So take
right,
your time, pick it carefully.
right, yeah,
And I, like with trucks are also in a similar boat. everyone thinks, oh, I can buy a Ford F-250 with a 4x4, but then you have to consider, is it too big for many trails I want to do?
Right. Yeah,
So,
I feel the same way. I used to have a Chevy Tahoe. I currently have a LX 570, and they
mhm.
seem pretty big, and they will be susceptible to a lot of pinstriping because there's going to be some tight trails out there that I have to be concerned about.
Mhm.
I've always wanted a truck, but that's a preference thing. My wife says no. As if I could never buy one. I don't see one in my future, unfortunately. But I think like my friend used to have a Tundra, and the interior was so nice, but you still have the utilitarian features of the truck bed, and I think that is a very awesome combination to have. I wish I could experience that someday.
I agree. I think a truck, I've had a lot of the friends that have some really nice built out off-roading trucks.
Right.
And yeah, guess what? It's still a daily driver. They can still, some of them have what's like a Milwaukee pack out. They can stack it up, everything's locked
Mm-hmm.
into place. It's not going to rattle loose, shake loose.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what? When they get home, from the camping trip, they take those ones out, they swap them with their work pack out gear or whatnot, and they're ready to go again to work on Monday. Maybe a little
Nice.
wash in
That's
the
cool.
truck, a little cleanup, and it's good to go.
Mm. Nice.
So
Yeah.
that's something to consider. Like I said, SUVs have the pros. Like a big pro
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
me, if I would take an SUV or a truck, is this SUV, everything inside the vehicle, all right, is going to stay dry in inclement weather versus your truck beds that if you do not have a truck bed cover,
Mm.
which again is going to limit your space, or a
Mm.
camper shell, or just some way to cover and secure your gear, it's going to
Right.
get wet. It's going to get damaged. It's going to get stolen. SUV, at least you have a fighting chance. They can still smash your window and take your
Right.
gear, but
Right.
you know how
I
that
did
works
not
out.
think about that. I did not think about that. Good point.
Exactly. And not to say that one is better than the other. It comes down to personal preference, right?
Right.
Personal affordability, because that's the biggest thing I always tell people. Can you
Mm.
even afford this vehicle?
Right.
Because you guys don't want to put yourself in debt just to go have fun. Maybe a little bit of debt.
Right.
We all do.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know, like what would you think is best for off-roading personally, in your personal opinion?
A body on frame for sure. I mean, again, all of my vehicles are body on frame, and the way they flex over terrain is just you can't match it. And unibody would probably again unibody is the frame and the shell
Mm-hmm.
of the car are one, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing in between, so that's why it's preferred that way. The unibody, I mean, body on frame is preferred with the ladder construction.
Oh yeah. Because like I said, my personal opinion too, as a technician,
Mm.
body on frame is the way to go. You could get away with unibody, it's lighter, but then you're going to sacrifice some capabilities. The biggest one you got to think about
Mm.
too, when the vehicle gets flexy, guess what? You may not be able to open the door. And if you flex the vehicle too much, you will bend the body. Now, granted, that
Right.
takes an extreme amount to do. Like you really have to be doing like John Bull and whatnot to get even close to that point. But that's also something to consider.
And am I correct in saying this? Let me know. If it's a unibody construction, that there's no such thing as a solid axle under a unibody construction.
Yeah,
They're all independent.
usually there are independent suspension. Don't get me wrong. Independent suspension's really good for what's up a washboard roads. Oh my god, that's your friend.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to you know capability, it's a little bit more susceptible to having axle issues. So if you get too flexy, you could break a CV axle.
Mm-hmm.
That's something to consider there. Again, every vehicle is different, so I'm not gonna. It's just a blanket statement, unfortunately. But that's what you got to consider. Is a truck, SUV, or crossover perfect for you? I'm
Mm-hmm.
always going to say I'll stand by this SUV all day. And depending on the make and model you get, you have a very capable vehicle.
Yeah. Okay, I agree with SUV all day, definitely.
Yeah. So now there's also right, Eric. There's some probably models to consider as well. Like, what would you consider? If I'm going to give you a list of a couple SUVs and
Mm-hmm.
vehicles to consider, and you just tell me which one you would look at. So number one, of course, says the Barbie doll of the off-road community is the Jeep Wrangler. Yeah. Number two, the Toyota 4Runner. Yeah. Okay. Number three, the Ford Bronco. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and then finally, I don't know why I put this on the list, but the Land Rover Defender. If you were to take any of those four vehicles out, which one would you pick?
I would have to go with the Foreigner. I'm just a big time Toyota enthusiast, but if I had to not be biased about it, I am excited about the Bronco. I mean, I don't know everything about the Bronco, but when I first saw that Ford came out with the Bronco with the retro styling, I'm like, I wish Toyota would do that again. And it's
Oh
very
yeah.
exciting to look at one. When I see one fixed up, when I go to the LA Auto Show, and I see
Hmm.
I'm always all over them because they just look so fun to modify and wheel.
Oh yeah, I've seen quite a few. Like 2 years ago, it was Expo 2023. They had the Ford Bronco experience. Or was it 2020?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it was 2023. They had the Ford Bronco experience, and you can actually get in the vehicle and ride along and do that. It was a lot of fun.
Right. Yeah.
And for me, I found the Bronco was fun, but I was still taking back that it's still a unibody in some situation. I know you get the sport model is unibody.
Right. Yes, for sure. Yeah.
So you guys to be careful if you're in a Ford Bronco. Make sure you do your research on which one you're getting because I know the Sasquatch. There's too many different sub variants.
Yeah, there's so many.
Ford, pick a few and stick with it like Toyota
Mhm.
does. But again, that's a whole other beast. If I were to pick one, again, I'm agreeing with you. Land Cruiser, Toyota 4Runner, only because I agree. The Toyota 4Runner is a good platform. And for me, it's only because as a technician, I know several things. I can get parts, within reason, maybe a few hours of where I'm at. They're easy to replace, easy to do. So I've been up in Lattle Creek and I put a hole in my radiator. I was able to get a radiator that day, installed on the trail, bolted all back up, and got
Wow.
back to running again within a few hours.
Wow.
Granted, do I suggest you try this at home? No, do not. But again, picking your vehicle and is going to be the hardest thing you're going to have to do. But with a little bit of research, a little bit of time, you will find the one that fits you the best thing to get the best thing as well.
I don't want to knock down the Jeep Wrangler because there's not a lot of vehicles available that still have a solid front axle. So you got to give them respect for that.
Yeah, in the US market too. Unfortunately, we're outliers when it comes to that kind of situation. A Jeep is the last holdout in the American market for a solid axle. So I'll give Jeep that one.
Right.
I know, like outside the U.S. market, there's a lot of vehicles that still come with a solid axle. The Toyota Land Cruiser 70 series.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, that is, if we could ever get one, if you guys could ever get one, jump on it. It's a unicorn.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, they don't really import them because of the 25-year import ban for the U.S.
Right.
Oh, man, Eric. So let's see. Let's jump down to one of our biggest things, the budget consideration, Eric. What do you what do you think they should be, doing in terms of budget?
Well, everyone's budget's obviously different, but let's assuming we all know that if you buy used, I don't mind buying used, knowing that I will beat it up on the trail. Like I don't want to drop 50, 60 grand on something and then beat it up. Given, I mean, we understand that that's nothing to some people. 50, 60 grand, 70 grand, that's nothing, and they will beat it up. But yeah, pick up an older vehicle, an older reliable vehicle with good history, and save tens of thousands of dollars, and then take it out there and know that you'll come back with it. That's why I like Toyota because it's known for that type of reliability. And look what you did. You had a incident at Lidl and you were able to get it fixed on the spot.
Hmm.
So yeah, used is great for that.
So this is a big one too, like with budget as well. This is why I'm bringing this up really early in this video for this reason that, this is true to any other hobby as well. If you
Yes.
can take that same pile of cash and burn it, and not cry, then you could get into this hobby.
Mhm.
No, I say that because again, this is why the Toyota Land Cruiser 200 series was discontinued for a few years here in the US. Is that nobody wants to take a $90,000 rig off-roading. Don't get me wrong, they are beautiful. You can get an early 200 series from like '08.
Yeah.
Same drivetrain, same everything, same comfort for a fraction of the price, like 20K.
Right.
So in terms of budget, it's going to come down to your personal, what you can afford and what you're comfortable with. Just
Right.
remember, when you do pick a vehicle, though, can you set the money on fire? If so, do it.
Yeah.
So,
On the other hand, oh, go ahead.
oh, yeah, go ahead. You're
On the other hand, when I bought the 2007 FJ Cruiser brand new,
mhm.
the I the satisfaction of knowing I have something straight off the Toyota assembly line, knowing it's brand new and I haven't messed with it and it has a fresh engine with like 0 miles on it. That's great too. Unfortunately, the prices of all these Toyotas nowadays are so high up there. Like when I bought the FJ Cruiser, it wasn't a very expensive vehicle. It was still below the Forerunners.
Mm-hmm.
You can't find a low end 4x4 from Toyota anymore.
No, and that's the thing too. You have to consider. Like, I think the cheapest off-road vehicle I've seen, brand new from factory, the Jeep Wrangler.
Yeah.
Now, granted, you're getting a sport model. You're still going to get 4-wheel drive, 4 high, 4 low, no lockers. Dana, I'm not sure what kind of Dana. I think it's a Dana 30. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Mhm.
Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, guys. I may just be talking out of my rear, but hey. But again, you're good. At least then you still get a baseline vehicle that you can still modify and make an off-road vehicle. I think I've seen them as cheap as $30,000 at one point. So, but Toyota, they're killing us lately, especially with the markups after the
Yeah.
pandemic, dude.
Oh
You
yeah.
got to think. I'm like, that cost for a brand new vehicle you're looking at for a 4-wheel drive Forerunner, I think stock, SR5, nothing special from dealer was, I think, like 45 to 50, depending on where
Jeez,
you
yeah.
bought it. Yeah, no, it's ridiculous, right, bro? So when you pick your vehicle too, you need to think about, like I said earlier, the cost of modification and maintenance. Like, are they going to be within reason? Like, that's what you have to consider as well, picking your vehicle for yourself. Because modification and maintenance is a big one. There's no sense in buying a vehicle if you can't afford to fix a CV axle when it breaks. Granted, it may have just broken from something simple that you may have done, right? Or it could have been just a bad item from factory, but you have to be able to prove that. At the end of the day, can you afford this is a good question.
Right. Because it doesn't stop there. You get the vehicle and then you start modifying it. All of a sudden, you put an extra 10 grand on the vehicle.
I agree. Like for my Forerunner, I think we put in so I just get the Forerunner cheap. So my 2016 Forerunner, for example, the CV axle, not CV axle, sorry. The suspension, let's say with the lift. That's your first thing you got to look for is what kind of lift can you put on this thing? My lift was $250. I got a rough country spacer lift. Yes, I know, rough country. Yes, spacer lift. Why, Robert? It's because one reason I was cheap and I was broke, and the money was right. The price was right. But it got me what I wanted, which was to put 35s. Oh, no, sorry, 33s on this car. Which, as I tell you, when you need to have the capabilities. But for me to put 33s, it cost me on those tires $1,200 at America's Tires. Out the door. But at least then I was able to have a more capable off-road vehicle. Like, what do you think, Eric?
No, I mean that extra lift on a vehicle like that is sometimes all you need to get by these obstacles. Because sometimes when you're on a fire road and all of a sudden there's going to be that 10-foot stretch that looks a little sketchy, and you were able to get by with it with a reasonable lift. But let's not forget, Robert, you are a certified mechanic. You are able to install those things on your own.
That's another thing we got to consider too. In terms of costs, can you even do the work yourself to save a few bucks?
Right.
Do you have the knowledge and the tools to do it? Because a lot of the stuff you could go to Harbor Freight and get the tools to do the work yourself.
Yeah. Yep.
Yes. But are you going to do it right? Are you going to have to pay for it twice?
Right.
I've had to do that sometimes where it's like on simple, silly things, I could do this myself. Yeah, bravado only gets you so far. Your wallet fills it twice as hard.
Yeah.
But
I've been there.
You got to consider also the other financial options as well for this stuff. Your insurance, all right? You got to consider like, hey, you're putting out extra mile, you're putting this vehicle in a more precarious situation. Is this vehicle going to be affordable for you to insure too? That's the biggest thing, especially in California for us, with rates going up tremendously. Can you afford to pay for the insurance, guys?
Yeah. And you got to really look at the fine print, because if you have an incident that's off-road, it might not be covered. So you got to really be careful with that.
And
And on the other hand, on the other side of that, even though it's a dirt road, that doesn't mean it's not a legal road. Fire roads also are considered legal roads, so you really have to understand those things.
oh yeah. So yeah. Now that's considered with our budget and everything. And I think you guys got to take that big pill and swallow it. So now move on to our next part of our topic here, guys. Driving. All right. Let's think about we got to consider though, if you even like the vehicle. Now, I come from the rental car industry. We had a lot of these vehicles. We had the Toyota 4Runner, in stock. We had the Ford Bronco. We had the Jeep Wrangler, top three off-roading vehicles out there. We had Toyota Tacomas. And this is a great way I like to tell people, if you even like these vehicles, because let's say you are going to consider a brand new one, rent one, save yourself the time and save the money. See if you even like this hobby. See if you even want to do it, because it's cheap to rent a vehicle. You borrow for the weekend. You say, hey, you know what? This is for me. I want to do this. Or B, you know what? I didn't care for this one so much. I don't like the features. The ergonomics weren't there. Or, that's what I think that you should consider when you are purchasing, trying to figure out your vehicle.
That's really smart, because the last vehicle I purchased, I've done this multiple times because I purchased lots of vehicles in my lifetime. Mm-hmm. It's funny how you go on a 5-minute test drive and have to make a $40,000 decision on a 5-minute test drive. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So just like you and I were just talking about a few days ago, there's a Land Cruiser 250 available on Turo out there. So if people want to try out the Land Cruiser 250, they can rent it for $100, $120, and then make a better decision on that $60,000 purchase that they're about to undergo.
Yeah. I've seen some of them go like at a close by dealership to me that's been asking me to come in. They're asking me to do a test drive, which is fine. But then ask what's the MSRP for the vehicle that they're selling? $80K for a Toyota Land Cruiser, first edition.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I wasn't sold. I was like, that's a big pill to swallow. Right. Don't get me wrong. I think they're nice vehicles. They're capable vehicles. I've never driven one. But again, do you even like it?
Right.
Is it too noisy? Is it too high? Is it too, too shaky? Just go rent it for the weekend. In our situation, go to Big Bear or some kind of trail where you're not going to screw it up royally, but you get a feel for the vehicle. You really get to put some miles under your wheels. All right. Is the fuel economy going to be something you can live with? Because remember, these are still stock vehicles.
Right.
You know how it is when you take these vehicles for modification. The OMPG's out the window.
Right. And that's the other thing about the off-roading hobby. Mm-hmm. Like a friend of mine has a LX and a GX 460, and they've done crazy, amazing things to it. But they tell me it's not the same vehicle they purchased. It's no longer a comfortable Lexus. It's like this monster truck of a vehicle. So, they have a new vehicle and they're going to take it slow and do almost no modifications. So to keep that comfortable stock ride,
Oh yeah. And that's the thing you got to think about too. It's like you are going to change this vehicle forever, to say the least.
Right.
Because I found once you do a modification, usually you're not going back.
Right.
All right. Now, granted, you could do another different modification that may improve something that you don't like, but usually once it's on, it's on. Because again, paying for it twice or pay for it once.
Right.
Buy once, cry once. Jinx, Eric.
Oh, I've been a victim to that because I'm a cheapskate personally, and I always cut corners, and I ultimately regret it. I've bought the first year of buying my FJ Cruiser, I got all terrains in stock size and sold them in a couple months because I wanted to get 285s. All my rigs have gone through multiple roof racks because of different decisions at the time. So yeah, I cried a lot, but I still bought twice. So I cried more than most people.
Yeah. Like for me, for example, I bought the Prinsu roof rack. I think they're a great and fantastic, setup. Mm-hmm. But that's because I like the modularity. Like my 4Runner and my Land Cruiser both have one. Uh-huh. So it was easier for me because then I could switch gear between the two. I'm like, hey, I want to put this one this weekend on this vehicle. Nice. And then in a few weeks I'll switch it back because I'm like, hey, I want on this vehicle because I'm doing a different type of trip. So that's something you have to consider. What kind of trips are you going to be doing?
Right.
So now that brings to the next part, your drivetrain considerations. All right. Understanding the difference between four-wheel drive and all-wheel drive is a big thing. This is where the crossovers will tend to suffer because they're going to be all-wheel drive. So don't get me wrong, it's all-wheel drives are capable, yes, but you have limitations now. So that's also something to consider as well.
Can you help me understand something?
What's that?
Because there's people. I mean, there's a difference between full time 4 wheel drive and all wheel drive.
So a good example of that with our total Land Cruisers,
Yeah.
they are full-time four-wheel drive,
Yes.
but we still have a transfer case which still has a high gear and a low gear.
Okay.
Now, in our transfer cases, the reason why we were able to even do that all full-time is in the transfer case, there's a separate differential in there that allows the wheels to spin at two different speeds. Because as you're making a turn, and getting some automotive technology for everybody, all right, you're gonna like as you make the turn, the outer wheels are going to spin faster than the inner wheels because they're going to go slower. It allows that to take place. Now, the difference though with the four-wheel drive, there's usually a too high, too low, and four low. Sorry, two high, four low, four high. Did I say that right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
And that's how it is with most off-roading vehicles or four-wheel drive vehicles is understanding that how that works. So, and then in that same setup though for a regular traditional four-wheel drive system, you're not going to be able to make turns sometimes in four-wheel drive because you'll start getting binding in the transfer case. It's not designed to do that, so you have to switch back to too high sometimes to make the turns. Again, it just depends, on what type of trails and terrain you're doing. Like I've known with my Forerunner, I'm able to leave it in a hotel in four high when I'm making turns, and it's fine. It's not going to hurt the transfer case, and it's not going to hurt anything else. But you have to be aware and considering of that as well with your drivetrain. Does that help explain your?
Yeah. Thank you. So a lot of people need to understand the difference between all wheel drive and full time 4 wheel drive. They're very different.
Now, full-time all-wheel drive, let me touch on that one more time on that one.
Mm-hmm.
All-wheel drive, yes, all four wheels have power, but this is where the kicker comes in. You do not you normally have a traditional transfer case like we have, where there's a low-range gear, and that's the thing. You just have a high-range gear, and it's great for highway, great for city, and great if you live in a snowy climate like, if you're somewhere that it snows a lot. All-wheel drive is your friend, at least. It's your not perfect friend, but it's a friend to help you get through the snowy conditions. So it's just something to consider.
Right. It was
So
when owning the FJ Cruiser was a 2 wheel drive vehicle that could go to 4 high, 4 low. And
mhm,
when I first picked up, so when I started wheeling the Land Cruiser 80,
mhm.
which is full time 4 wheel drive, it was an amazing difference because you know Hungary Valley is a place that I typically go to, and in that FJ Cruiser, ultimately I'd have to switch over to 4 low or whatnot. The Land Cruiser, I barely touched all those features. It just took the trails in its regular mode in 4 high, and I didn't have to mess with anything. It was so capable, and on top of that, it has solid front axle, so it's just an amazing vehicle.
Oh yeah, I have the same situation where my 80 drives just perfectly and smooth,
Mm,
and the 80 is wider than or actually, I think they're about the same width as the FJ Cruiser. I might be wrong. It might be a little bit, the 80 might be a little bit wider, but that really does help out. And especially because, like I said, the 80 series it depends on the model you have. It does come with some other bells and whistles. Like mine come with lockers for my 80,
mhm.
which is yes, every 80 series owner says this. Oh, it's triple locked. Yes, we all do say that. It's true, but it's because we have a front and rear differential lock, which really helps out
And
when you
center.
and center different. Sorry, center diff lock as well.
Mm,
Then it helps make us more capable when we're off roading. Do we use
right.
it half the time, or even a quarter of the time?
No.
Nope. I just turn it on about monthly just to ensure that it even still actuates. That's it. So, I agree with you. I think the 80 series it's a great vehicle to have. So, you also got to think of when in your drivetrain considerations, is this vehicle coming with locking differentials or traction control? So
Right.
on On my wife's Forerunner, it has a track, which mimics a locker, but it's not a locker.
Mm,
You just
right.
hear a lot of click, 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 and that's just it's cycling to lock up the wheel so we can get over an obstacle, but it's not the same. So,
By the way, they said the A track on the new Land Cruiser. You don't even hear the anymore.
oh, I'm glad they fixed that. It was just it. You know what's funny is when I was at the dealership, we had customers come in. They, oh my, I hit this button and it started making this clicking noise. It's
Right.
fine, it's completely normal.
Right.
But no one reads the owner's manual anymore.
Yeah. My FJ Cruiser has 8-track and rear locking diff, and at the time I didn't really understand what the hell it was. But 8-track is a very good technology. It's got me through a lot through sand and rocks and climbs.
Oh yeah. So like, I've done the same thing too. Like my 80 series, I can get through a lot of obstacles a lot easier than I can with the Forerunner. So yeah, it just depends. Which comes down to also what kind of terrain are you guys taking your vehicles on? That's one of the things you have to consider. Where are you going to take it to? Are you going to go to Glamis? Are you going to go to John Bull? Are you going to go to Joshua Tree? Or are you going to be a mall crawler?
Right. I mean, that's where experience comes in. It's like it's a chicken or the egg kind of situation. You can't find out what's out there until you have a vehicle, but we can't tell people to pick their vehicle based on experience. So it's a very let me get into focus. There you go.
Yeah, let's try that
so
again.
it's
Yeah, exactly. You got to decide, whether it's what's right for you for your situation.
right.
Some
Yeah,
vehicles
it's
are
really
more equipped
difficult.
for,
Yeah.
some vehicles are better equipped for certain situations than others. So you got to consider that. Like Eric, what is some of your favorite trails to do?
I mean, I love Anza-Borrego. It's all desert. You have a variety of trails. It's not forest road. Again, it's all desert, but there's canyons and there's sand washes, and it's just an amazing place. And they have the obstacle course in Octilla Wells.
Mm-hmm.
So it has everything. And I've been there several times, and I know for a fact that I haven't been to all the locations. But fortunately, I could say that even a stock Forerunner, like a basic SUV 4x4 on a
Mm-hmm.
body on frame can do it. I've seen plenty of Subarus there as well. It's generally flat, it's well maintained, and that's something I want to mention. When you're out there in the wild,
Mm-hmm.
you think you're like in no man's land, but it's not always the truth. Our money, our fees, our taxes are they take good care of our public lands. There's going to be people that complain about some of the decision making by the higher ups and the politicians and whatnot. But when you're there, when I'm in the middle of nowhere, like in Death Valley, and I see this pristine road taking me all the way to Racetrack Playa, I'm like, that's money well spent.
Mm-hmm.
And thank goodness someone's out there taking care of these lands so we could reach these destinations.
Yes.
And it's funny how people complain about washboard roads, but that is a side effect of taking care of the roads. That's because of when they grade the road, that washboard bump is a what's it called?
The tractors.
It's yeah, the tractors create that because they're taking care of the roads. We just can't get around it.
Yeah, and it's also some erosion too. It's also involved with some of that too.
Mm.
Those
Right.
washboard roads, but again, it does help though, and you got to ascertain though what you're going to do though, like with your vehicle.
Right.
That's the biggest thing. Are you like for me? I love Big Bear. Now, granted, am I going to
Mm.
do John Bull in my Forwarder? No, but would I do in the 80 series? Yes. So you got to determine what vehicle is right for you on these kind of trips. What can you afford? So you got to think of that. Like, for example, let's use a Jeep Rubicon for this example. That's their high end version of the Jeep Wrangler. That's
Yes.
going to be one of the most capable ones. All right. I think they come factory with lockers, front and rear, with a sway bar disconnect on some of them too, which gets them a little more flexy and they can do a lot more off road adventures. But I think, where am I going to take this vehicle to? All right. Or am I, I got to consider that when you're trying to pick your vehicle. Now, if I would take one of those, yeah, I could do Gold Mountain and John Bull in stock form because that's what they're designed to do from factory.
Right.
like unlike us, with our forerunners and our Land Cruisers, no, they need a bit of modification to consider those trails. Not that it's
Yes.
impossible, nope, but that's how you have to approach this situation. So, like, you got to consider too in this situation as well, ground clearance.
Right.
I always say have a significant amount of ground clearance. Give yourself at least, well, I don't want to put a number on it because every vehicle is different. Some vehicles are tucked up a little higher underneath, so you may not need as much ground clearance. Same thing as approach and departure angles.
Oh
Toyotas
yeah.
are known for one thing, for terrible approach and departure angles, right, Eric?
So that's the thing with my decision on buying an LX 570 versus a 200 series. With those two vehicles are related, but just by looking at them, you could tell that the Land Cruiser 200 has a better approach and departure angle.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Lexus has too much flair on the front. It has this big chin that will definitely get caught if. Actually, this used vehicle I have, it has some scratch marks, and I'm sure it's not from off-roading. It's just from regular usage,
Mm-hmm.
because it has that air dam at the bottom.
Oh yeah, I'd say a lot of those break. Just because even just going over a steep driveway,
Right.
because you
And one of
approach
the
it too fast. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. One of the criticisms of the new Land Cruiser 250 though is the height of the vehicle is lower than the existing models like the 4Runner.
Yeah, but the cool part is I've seen I remember at Expo we were there and we saw the
Mhm.
really modified ones for the
Yeah,
250 series. Not
right.
that you can't modify them, but that's something to consider too. Is like, hey, how much can I take away? So, like on my wife's Forerunner, I did a Viper cut myself to cut
Mhm.
the bumper away to really give it a much better approach and departure angle,
Yeah, yeah.
or at least approach angle. I didn't cut the rear bumper because the original plan was to eventually get a steel bumper, but that's that's going to get our next topic in a minute. But it's the costs at that point.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you got to think your approach and departure angles are something you got to consider. Jeeps, yeah, they went out on that one. Approach and departure angles are a lot better. So, like the Forerunner, it's designed to be a mom hauler. I love driving that thing. That's my favorite car to drive lately. But
Yeah, I think it's a good all-around vehicle.
another thing is you got to consider your tire options. Everyone's going to ask, Eric, what's the common question we always hear on the forums and on the group pages
Can I fit 35s
without a lift?
without a lift? Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody asks that. And the answer is, well, yeah, you can. However, there's always a big caveat is it going to rub?
Right.
So
Right.
the Toyota 4Runner, for me, for example, I found that your tires there are great. The factory ones are okay. They work. But once you go start going up in size, you got to consider, okay, now I need a good offset in the wheel department.
Right.
But the tires are, because I want to fit these, Toyo, mud terrain tires or whatever, how it is, Eric.
Right now, yeah.
That's something you have to consider. Like my Land Cruiser, I stuffed 35s underneath it with a spacer lift at first. I eventually rectified it because I hated the rubbing and went with a dedicated 35, 3-inch lift from Old Man Emu. But you have to consider that now. Right, Eric? Like when you first bought your FJ Cruiser, what was your first modifications in terms of wheels? Like, did you do tires and rims?
I kept my stock wheels, but I put again all-terrain stock size, which I got rid of in a couple of months. But I went up to 285s. Actually, I take that back. My first mod was a Old Man Emu lift with heavy springs, and then I put in 285s. And ultimately, I found out I was still rubbing, but I had a friend that was a welder, and he was doing like
the body
body
chop
mount
mod.
shop, yeah, like for friends.
I have a friend. Well, I had some situation too. My situation when I did the space lift at first for the Forerunner, it was rubbing really bad on the body. We had to do the same situation. We had to go in there with the welder and just cut. So, how much of your vehicle are you willing to cut? So you have to consider what tires are you going to be limited to before you have to start doing suspension and lift modifications. All right. So
Right. I mean, the whole concept of BMC, some people are like, what, you want me to cut the vehicle I just dropped 50 grand on?
That's the thing you got to consider. Are you okay with setting $50,000 on fire?
Oh, that's what you meant.
Exactly.
Right.
Now, are you okay with doing that? Because you are going to, you want to have fun with these vehicles. You want to go out and have a good time. You don't want to be
Right.
stuck or be the one vehicle to slow everyone down on the trail, break down on the trail. So you got to think those situations through,
Yeah. I mean, for people who don't understand the concept of BMC and rubbing, so I've seen tires rub on the body of a vehicle and they get torn up, and you are just wasting your $250 tire, and you're destroying the integrity of the vehicle. So this is important. It's not just an annoying sound. You don't want to ruin the tire just because you lifted your vehicle and you didn't do all the things necessary to make it, capable.
Agreed. I have on that one. I think that, having a capable vehicle really that can be modified, from factory easily is your best friend. That's why I'm going to
Mm,
get into the Jeep Wrangler. The Jeep Wrangler on a base stock model, they come with 285s. Now,
mm,
whether it
mm,
comes with mud terrains or all terrains kind of depends on which one you got at the dealership. But your tires are one of your most critical components to pick at. So when you're picking your vehicle, you got to think that way. Hey, look, I can get, these tires to fit. These are good quality tires. And tires are the one thing we should never cheap out on. So as you're picking your vehicle and picking how to set it up, that's what you got to think of.
right, right.
So finally, we got to the golden moment, Eric. Aftermarket mods. How easy is it for you to mod your vehicle?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
what's cool is like the FJ Cruiser, the GX 470, and the Forerunner. They're like very related underneath. Like among
Mm-hmm.
my family, we've rotated suspensions. Like one guy gets a Icon suspension for his GX and gets tired of it, and
Mm-hmm.
we buy it from him because we know it's gonna fit. So that's kind of cool when you know there's a product out there that's applicable to
Base.
multiple models,
Yeah.
so some people don't know, like if they're shopping on Facebook Marketplace and they see a suspension for a GX 470. Oh, by the way, that fits your Forerunner. All of a sudden you have all these selections.
Yeah. And not to say that's a good or bad thing. So, like, same thing with the Jeep Gladiator and the Jeep Wrangler. They're similar platforms that
Mm,
have some interchangeability. There's still a lot of changes. I know the Gladiator's longer in terms of, but they're still similarly interchangeable in some
mm,
regards.
right.
And so you got to think of this, for your vehicle. And this is the way I think about it. Like me and Eric said, we change suspension always first. You got to think, okay, that's going to be one of your most expensive mods. In my case, it was cheap because I went the cheap route. But I could have easily gone the other way and went a $7,000 lift from Icon as well, like a stage 7, and have a much smoother ride than I would have right now. But again, it comes down to buy once, cry once.
Yeah. There's
So
one thing though a lot of people don't know about these high-end suspensions, that they need to be rebuilt after a certain amount of miles. And all of a sudden you're spending labor to remove the suspension, have it rebuilt, and then reinstalled. And some people can't handle that cost.
yep.
Or have their vehicle on jack stands for a few days while that's being done.
And if it's your daily, can you go without your daily driver for,
All
3 or 4 days?
all
That's
right.
something you consider. The same thing as tires. After you do your suspension, your tires comes next. Can you afford to replace your tires? Let's say a hit set, vandalism takes place, which does. There's some people that don't like our gas guzzlers in the off-roading community. If someone were to vandalize your tire and the tire shop will not warranty it, can you afford another $350 tire?
Right. Yeah, yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
big one, and they will wear out, especially if you don't do your alignments at a regular basis. You have to consider, hey, this vehicle is gonna, these tires are gonna wear out, and I can't afford to replace them.
Right.
Well, that's your thing. Can you even afford to replace this guy? And that's why I say you
Yeah.
need to have two things if you're going to get into this thing. One, a high paying threshold for spending some money because it will hurt. Two, can you afford to do your repairs and maintenance?
Right.
So, like, skid plates are another thing, and bumpers are you're going to be the one that you want because you want to protect your vehicle out there, right, Eric?
Yeah, it depends though. Like I have two vehicles with steel bumpers, and I'm just gonna admit it. I did it for the looks. At first, I did it for the looks at first, but my DeMello bumper on my FJ Cruiser, gives me an amazing approach angle. So I could honestly say that there's a lot of functionality over form for that purchase. But like I have an ARB bumper on my 80, and I mean I'm not in a place where I'm gonna run into deer. I mean, I've seen plenty of stories on Facebook with people in different part of town or the states or different part of the country. They run into animals like what, like once a year or something. So they need it. They need these guards, and I don't know if I need it, but whatever. I did for
No,
myself.
oh, I agree. Like for me, it's like you got to consider that too. It's like when you finally get your vehicle, whichever one you decide, and then you got to think of your modifications. How much more weight is this going to add to your vehicle?
Oh
How much?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
again, it comes down to your MPGs. Like the stock Toyota 4Runner, the SR5 that I have with the 4-wheel drive from factory is 16 to the gallon. That's it. That is your mileage right there. All right,
Right.
that's what we average before we put the modifications on. Now let's
Mm,
add a bumper. That
right.
bumper in some cases can weigh up to 700-800 pounds,
Mm,
depending on
yep.
the construction and the
Yeah.
accessories that are mounted to it. You're
All
really
right. Oh
stacking on the
yeah.
weight.
Oh yeah.
So that's the thing people have to consider as well. It's like you want to protect your investment, yes, but you also got to think this is going to start costing me more money in terms of fuel and in terms of enjoyment of the ride. Because eventually, like you said, once you started modifying and putting all these bumpers and winches and all this bells and whistles, you took that really well dialed in factory vehicle and made it just a monstrosity of an off-roader.
Yeah.
So it's just a lot to
At
consider.
least
Like
it's yours. It's your monster.
that's true. It's your, you know, and that's the thing too. Is you got to think of what kind of trips are you doing? Are you planning to customize the vehicle for your needs?
Right. I mean,
Because
hey, I just went camping over the weekend,
mm-hmm.
and there like there's I was in the same places with a Prius, like they didn't need all the mods that I had.
Yeah, and that's the thing you consider too. Is like if you're just going to go to a paid campground in some situations, do you even need those modifications? Half
Right.
the time, 3/4 of the time, no.
Yeah, again,
Now,
it depends on your experience. You will decide later on with the vehicle what you got to do. And I really recommend people just take it slow when it comes to modifying their vehicle.
agreed. You really, this is what I would sum this up to. What is your budget? Start there. What can you afford? Are you okay? Are you comfortable with losing this vehicle off roading? Because it has happened.
Oh, yeah.
So we have budget, we have losing the vehicle, and then we got to think of some other stuff. How easy is it to modify is your thing you got to consider. Am I
Right.
going to be able to afford all the modifications and maintenance?
Right. And is this true? I might believe it's true. I just bought my Lexus. So if I took my Lexus, and I've
Mm-hmm.
read about this, if I take my Lexus to get it serviced at a Lexus dealership, it's going to cost me more for the same service if I took it to a Toyota dealership. And I know Toyota dealerships will take in a Lexus. This is the same darn thing underneath.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, about affordability of maintaining these vehicles, because if they look at the badge on your vehicle, say this is a Lexus, some shops will want to charge you more just because of that.
There is some badge bias, so that's
Mm.
something to consider as well. The assumption is, and this is what I was always told, is if you could afford to buy this, you should be able to afford the maintenance. That's what you have to think about it.
Smack me with reality.
Exactly. So, like I said, you got to decide for yourself what are you comfortable with in terms of, you know, getting into this hobby. This is a really expensive hobby. I think since I've joined this in 2018, doing this, consistently, I've probably spent closer to vehicle modifications and all the other gear I've gotten, probably close to $40,000,
Easy. Yeah.
not including the vehicles.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. You're right. I mean, what am I thinking? I mean, both of your vehicles are worth over. I mean, at least your Forerunner was worth more than 40,000 or around there.
It's about 30K for that vehicle.
Right? Yeah.
That's just the
Back in the
vehicle.
day, yeah. I
Mine's
miss
only
those days.
2016s.
30K. I
Again,
miss
that's
the
a
days of $30,000 Toyotas.
well. Here's the thing: I bought my Toyota 4Runner 2 years ago in 2022 with over
Mm,
130K on it.
mm.
So that's the thing. Consider too is that buying used is not always a bad thing.
Right. Yeah.
Asterisk on that, right, Eric?
Yeah. I mean, there's
Because
nothing wrong with like buying certified used, and I know
well,
there's some people who don't like buying warranty, but if you want some peace of mind, there are good warranty products out there.
here's one thing to consider, and this is where the asterisk comes in for me.
Yeah.
For me, it comes down to when you buy someone else's project car,
Well,
how
yeah.
well did they do the work?
Yeah, that's a big careful. You got to be careful there.
Exactly. That's the biggest thing that I always tell people. Like, you got to understand, like, did they wire this with their feet, so to speak?
Right.
Now, as a technician, I've seen a lot of things come through the door from some vehicles that were immaculately wired. The guys really took the time to route it through. They shielded it properly. They zip tied it in place so it wasn't shaking. But I've also seen a rat's nest of wires underneath dashboards and
All
underneath the
right.
engine hood.
Yeah.
So, are you willing to buy someone else's problem child? Because
Yeah.
they're
You
not
got
always
to
getting
really
rid
be
of it.
careful.
They're not always getting rid of it for the best reasons.
Mm-mm.
Sometimes,
Yeah.
yeah, they just got out of the hobby and that's it. Other times, they really screwed it up and they're trying to pawn it off on somebody else to get their money back.
Right. Yeah, that happens.
So
Like
consider
if I
that.
had to buy a Forerunner or FJ Cruiser right now, I'd want to buy as stock as possible. And that's also why stock Land Cruisers
Mhm.
sell so much on Bring a Trailer, because you know the virgin vehicles that have not been messed up by people going crazy with mods are just more reliable, because the last person that probably touched that was a Toyota technician.
Well, it's not so much as that too. Is also like in the Jeep world, I've seen that they have their vehicles. It varies from owner to owner. Some were mall crawlers. The truck vehicle never saw the dirt, and it's a good vehicle. Everything works, all the components work, but you got to consider that when you're buying used versus new. But again, are you willing to buy someone else's problem child?
Right.
So, like I said, when it comes to picking your vehicle, I know this vehicle is running a bit long, but you guys understand there's a lot to consider. You're picking something that's potentially an investment. And granted, it's a depreciating investment, so you have to consider that as well. Off-road vehicles are fun, they're exciting, but man, do they come with some headaches and some strong considerations before you sign your name on the dotted line.
Oh yeah.
And picking ultimately the right vehicle for you is going to do one thing: take time and take a lot of consideration. So, like I said before, rent one. Go, I don't know, see if a friend has one. You can borrow. You go with the wheelie with them. Like, hey, let me drive this for a few minutes. Let me see if I get the feel for this. See if I even want one of my own.
Right.
So
It's going to be tough because you can't always. You could test drive a vehicle and you could test drive a stock vehicle, but you can't always test drive a heavily modded vehicle. So you don't know what your future holds after you do all your modification. It might not be the same vehicle that you bought.
agreed. Well, Eric, I think we've touched on all the points for this one. You know, guys, I want to thank you guys all again for watching. If you like this content and want to see more like it, please click this like and subscribe button, guys. And also remember to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Also follow Eric at Mission Offroad. And guys, we want to thank you again for watching the videos this far. We appreciate every time you guys do click and watch this. Again, guys, this is Robert with Wonder Offroad saying you can't go wrong with that.
Can't go wrong with that.